Inspired by a true story, a group of curious students set out on a journey that unveils the eerie reality behind a mysterious event. This movie is based on a true incident, but with a hint of fiction. The film opens with a woman named Holly recording herself for a documentary project. She tells us that in February 1959, 9 Russian hikers ventured into the icy wilderness of the Ural Mountains. Tragically, 2 weeks later, all of them were found dead. This event had since been famously known as the Dyatlov Pass incident. Holly was a dedicated psychology student who became fascinated with this Dyatlov Pass incident and documented her interest on video. She first learned about it in 2008 when a group of 30 scientists gathered in the Ural Mountains of Russia to investigate but failed to solve the 50-year-old mystery. The incident was named after Igor Dyatlov, the leader of the doomed 1959 expedition. One day, Kittles, one of Holly's professors, assigns a class project about the tragic expedition, and Holly decided to collaborate with Jensen, a film student and conspiracy theorist, to create a documentary on the subject. They began by interviewing Dr. Kittles, who revealed that she learned about the Dyatlov incident through a fictionalized account of the event, and later, during post-production, Jensen uncovered that the author of the account died in a mysterious car accident on an empty road. This made no sense to Jensen, and he claimed that there was a more sinister cause to it. In their interview, Dr. Kittle shared her thoughts, suggesting that the hikers might have suffered from hypothermic dementia, which caused the chaotic scene that rescuers discovered. Jensen, however, dismissed the theory, along with the idea of paradoxical undressing, arguing that it was improbable for all 9 experienced hikers to suffer hypothermia simultaneously. When Dr. Kittles proposed an avalanche as another possible explanation, Jensen rejected this idea as well, pointing out that hikers wouldn't wander barefoot for hours after an avalanche, and determined to uncover the truth, Holly planned a trip to Russia's Mountains of the Dead, a place known for numerous mysterious deaths, named by the indigenous Mansai tribe. Joining her were Denise, an audio engineer, an experienced mountain climber, Andy, and JP. After preparing all the necessary equipment, Holly showed her plane ticket for their documentary, announcing that their flight was scheduled for January 25. The scene then cuts to a month later, where news reports surfaced about Holly's team going missing in the Ural Mountains in Russia, and in a Russian news segment, various individuals shared their theories about the incident, and one person highlighted how the mountain's unpredictable winds could disorient hikers, making them hallucinate and lose soberness. Another suggested alien involvement, while others proposed mystical explanations, referencing frequent reports of unidentified flying objects and Yeti sightings around the area. The reporter also mentioned the Mansai tribe's account of strange loud noises and orange fireballs seen in the mountain during the Dyatlov incident, and there is still no explanation for the causes, but a Mansai elder claimed that the area is highly bordered by the spirit world. The news continued on an American news channel where a group of people continued their search for the students in the heavily covered mountains. Meanwhile, the news also reported leaked footage from the missing students' recording equipment, and the footage showed a distressed Holly recounting how she opened the door, leading to a complete darkness, and the scene then shifts to the students themselves before this tragic turn of events, and they were traveling on a train and just chatting as they went. JP casually tells the group that he is in for the adventure and that he even got food and supplies that they may need for weeks, and everyone was impressed by his caution, and they continued to appreciate the snowy Russian territory. After arriving in the city of Ivdel, they decided to interview a man who was actually part of the Dyatlov expedition. His name was Pyotr Karov, and he luckily didn't go to the mountain with his friends that day. He was saved from the tragic death, but soon was admitted to a mental hospital, and this was 15 years ago, and now this investigative documenting group went there to see him and ask some questions. However, they were turned away from the psychiatric hospital where Pyotr was admitted, and the doctors and nurses pushed them away shamefully and even declared the man was already dead. But before leaving, Johnson spotted an elderly man holding a sign near a window, suspecting he was Pyotr, but for now, nobody could understand what he wrote, but surely they will decode it later. That evening, the group focused on securing transportation to Vizhay, a starting point of their hike to the mountain, and they decided to find a willing driver at the local bar. As they approached the bar, they took a picture to capture the moment, and inside, Holly informed the bartender about their documentary on the Dyatlov incident and their next stop, Vizhay, and hearing this, the bartender prepared flaming shots with a local version of moonshine, and after everyone drank, he showed them a picture resembling their group photo, explaining that the Dyatlov expedition drank the same shots to celebrate their departure just the night before. This made everyone second-guess their project, but Jensen cut the tension by mocking them if they were afraid, and soon after, a local named Sergei, eager to be part of the documentary, approached the group and offered to take them to Vizhay. The next day, they rode with Sergei, who visited his aunt, Alia, and Sergei casually mentions that Alia is actually one of the first recruiters at the Dyatlov site 15 years ago. The group was excited to have found a person to talk to with first-hand experience of the incident, so they became very happy. Sergei offered to ask Alia if she would participate in their documentary. Holly asked Sergei to translate the sign the elderly man was holding at the psychiatric hospital, and she wrote in the snow, drawing the exact letters. After a few corrections done by Sergei, he revealed that the sign was a warning sign to stay away, and this spooked the group, but it didn't stop their journey. Inside, they sat with Ayla to talk about the incident, and in the interview, Alia recalled that her brother Valyik was with her that day they discovered the first body, followed by the rest. She described the suffocating atmosphere of the scene, causing her to retreat, but she stumbled upon two more strange bodies with odd machines or equipment. Holly was shocked to hear about the two extra bodies found beyond the reported 9, prompting her to cut the interview and asks Ayla to be sure of the numbers as she told them. Alia, however, insisted that she knew what she saw, and it was definitely 11 dead bodies. Shortly after being dropped off the trailhead, Jensen began sharing conspiracy theories inspired by Alia's account. Soon they reached the base of Claude Shackle, the mountain of the dead, and started their ascent. After a tiring hike, the group set up camp to pass the night, and they set up some fire and gathered to chat and laugh. That evening, Holly filmed Jensen, who was searching for orange lights similar to those reported in the sky before the Dyatlov incident. However, as Holly walked back to camp, she was alarmed by a peculiar roar, but Jensen seemed oblivious to it, and the following morning, the climber group urgently woke Holly to show her footprints near the campsite. Intrigued, Holly documented the two distinct sets of human-like prints, noting that they were barefoot, which was impossible for humans in such temperatures. Strangely, the footprints trail began and ended in the middle of nowhere, as if those who made them could fly. As the group continued their hikes, tensions rose when Andy and JP accused Holly of fabricating evidence to make her documentary more interesting. Later, they were interrupted by an eerie howling, prompting them to investigate and discover more footprints. From a distance, Andy called them over, pointing out more tracks leading to a weather tower, and curious, Holly climbed the tower but fell, startled by the sight of a human tongue inside. This discovery rattled Denise, who urged them to abandon the project, and as Andy tried to calm Denise, Holly went to Jensen, who was sitting isolated. He mentioned a mountain with winds that produce a sound frequency capable of driving people and animals insane, wondering if they were experiencing something similar. He recounted a time where he heard similar sounds, causing him to panic and run aimlessly, convinced that demons were chasing him, and this vulnerability of Jensen prompted Holly to share her own story. However, as they continued talking, we glimpsed two strange beings running past them from a distance. And soon, the group reached Dyatlov Pass, the exact location of the incident, and while the rest of the team set up camp, Holly and Jensen began filming, recapping the events of February 1959. Holly explained that according to Russian officials, the unknown compelling force caused the expedition members to flee into the night between 9 and 11 p.m., and they recreated the scene, adding photos and drawing outlines in the snow. Holly detailed the deaths of Rustam, Igor, Zenaida, Limbuda, Nicholas, Alexander, and Alexander Kolotov. She noted that while hypothermia was believed to be the cause of death, some had crushed skulls and broken ribs without external signs of injury, and Alexander Zolotrov in particular showed high radiation levels, raising questions about where he could have encountered radiation in the desolate mountains. She also recounted how Gregory and Yuri froze to death by their dying fire, and later Holly filmed the seasoned climbers complaining about their devices malfunctioning. Concerned, Andy suggested either heading back or moving to a location where their gadgets worked, and he added his suspicion that they had covered 14 miles since morning, which seemed impossible. Denise agreed, but JP argued that by the time that they finished packing it would be too dark to travel, and that night Holly and Jensen decided to use a Geiger counter to look for sources of radiation, and as they followed the device's signals, it led them to a mound of snow that seemed to have been disturbed recently. This caught their attention and Holly started digging into the snow, and after a while, she uncovered a metal door that was locked from the outside. When they tried to open the door, they found that it was not locked but was frozen shut. When Holly returned to camp, she saw Denise inviting Andy to bed. Holly sat next to JP by the fire, and soon Jensen joined them, shared a drink, and then went to bed. After he left, JP apologized to Holly for accusing her of faking the barefoot prints and insulting her, and Holly told him that he could make it up to her by keeping her warm that night. The next morning, Andy woke Denise up wanting to record their intimacy. However, before they could get to it completely, they were interrupted by muffled explosions from a distance. Everyone in the group woke up in alarm from their tents, and just in time to see more explosions that triggered an avalanche. They all rushed to escape, but Denise, who was still barely dressed, stumbled in the snow. Andy went back to help her, hoping to save her from the hurtling avalanche, but the wave of snow forced him to leave her behind to her death. Denise was quickly buried under the snow, and Andy was swept away, and the group rushed to help Andy and shield him from the rocks. Once the avalanche stopped, Jensen accused Andy of abandoning Denise. JP interrupted, saying there was nothing that they could have done to save her, and Jensen then suggested that the military might have targeted them and had set off the explosions to create the avalanche. After all, the government doesn't want the public to find out anything about these activities. They stopped arguing when Andy, who was injured, asked for his backpack, saying it had a first aid kit, and JP helped to realign Andy's broken leg bone, and they all gathered around a fire. Jensen tried to make a distress call, but there was no cell signal, and JP suggested using a flare instead, but Jensen hesitated. Holly then mentioned the radioactive door she and Jensen had found, and this revelation made JP angry, and he believed they should have sought shelter there instead of staying out in the cold for the whole night. They all agreed, and so Jensen fired the flare, and he noted that the orange light looked like what it had been reported before the Dyatlov incident. Soon JP saw two men dressed in black approaching, claiming to be the rescue team. However, Andy was suspicious of how quickly they arrived, considering it took their group 3 days to reach Dyatlov. Plus, the people were not holding any backpacks, so it's likely they could be hired assassins by the government. Meanwhile, as they drew closer, Andy urged them to flee, but Holly didn't want to leave him behind since they couldn't carry him, and Andy asked for the flare gun as the others ran to the metal door. As they fled, the rescue team started shooting at them, and Andy used the flare gun to defend himself, and sadly and shortly, he was killed by a gunshot. Holly rushed to work on melting the door's frozen hinges, and in the process, JP got wounded due to a gunshot into his thigh, and after several attempts, they managed to open the door, and Holly was reluctantly pulled into the darkness. JP and Jensen also got in with her, and inside, Jensen used the camera's night vision to find a power switch which lit up lights toward the long tunnel. JP suggested barricading the door, but Jensen argued it was pointless as their attackers could just lock them inside until they died of dehydration. Instead, Jensen suggested finding another way out, and at the end of one tunnel, something broke the lights, plunging them into darkness, and Holly, sensing danger, insists that they go down a different path and find a safe place to settle. They eventually found a lab where Holly treated JP's wound, and Jensen squeezed through an opening and found classified files, which Holly helped him examine. Jensen found a photograph of the USS Eldridge, known for the 1943 Philadelphia experiment, when the US government supposedly conducted teleportation experiments on the ship. As they continued looking through the fire, they found disturbing images of people fused to the ship. Holly and Jensen ventured further into the lab, opening another door that released a terrible smell of decay, and inside they discovered a natural cave and a nuclear power cell, which Jensen thought was the source of the radiation and electricity, and Holly deduced that one of the victims, Alexander, must have found these tunnels, which explained his highly radioactive death. Holly found a flashlight belonging to a recently deceased soldier, and she checked the soldier's mouth and realized that he had a tongue that she found earlier, and she guessed that this soldier had released something from the bunker, which was why the door was unlocked when they found it. And Jensen found more remains that barely looked human with sharp teeth, and then hard metal clinging from a room that was initially closed, and they investigated and found large swinging meat hooks and a camcorder identical to Jensen's. It contained footage of their conversation from moments before the battery died. Jensen explained that during the Philadelphia experiment, the USS Eldridge supposedly traveled from Philadelphia to Norfolk. He speculated that the camcorder and their remains might be linked to these phenomena, and when they heard JP's screams, Holly and Jensen rushed to him, but when they got there, they only found two emaciated human-like creatures eating their friend, devouring his whole existence. The mutants then turned their attention to Holly and Jensen, eventually grabbing Jensen. Holly defended her friend with a chain, making the creatures disappear, but surprisingly the creatures could teleport and appear wherever they desired. After Holly and Jensen regrouped, they went to JP, but the mutants kept following them, appearing at every turn and every corner. As the creatures appeared on the ceiling beside JP, Holly and Jensen had to leave him behind once and for all. However, the mutants chased them, leading them through the bunker as if directing them to the specific place. The duo got inside quickly and shut the doors behind them, and they secured themselves in a room and wondered why the mutants hadn't killed them when they had the chance, and inside the room they found something unsettling and extraordinary. Jensen suggested this was why they weren't killed, and Holly threw a rock at the formation before them, and it seemed to go through a portal and a wall, surprising them, and Jensen hypothesized that the formation and creatures were related to the teleportation but couldn't teleport through the bunker's doors, and he thought the creatures might have come from the structure, which could be a transportation wormhole. As Jensen looked around, he saw tribal paintings on the walls and theorized that the Manus might have discovered the wormhole and tried to use its powers for their advantage. Meanwhile, their flashlight died, leaving them in complete darkness, and Jensen switched the camera to night vision and comforted Holly, who was distressed because the events mirrored her nightmare, where opening a door led to darkness that trapped them, and later, Jensen sparked an idea and proposed to Holly that by imagining a specific place, they might be able to travel through time and space, and she suggested they envision the bunker's entrance since it was the last clear and closest memory before being there, and determined they held hands and contemplated entering the wormhole, and shortly they did and stepped into together regardless of the outcome. Meanwhile, this scene was in February 1959, and the woman Isla and her companion Vilak found two more bodies near the bunker's entrance. They quickly ran toward the unconscious bodies, but were apprehended by Russian military-looking men, refusing to approach the bodies. Isla and her companion were confused and argued with the men, and they were confused because all the 9 expedition members had already been accounted for, leaving only 2 bodies excluded. Moments later, the Russian military shortly ordered them to piss off, and they were chased away, and despite Isla's protest to investigate more, her companion Vilak dragged her away, and after making sure they left, the commanding officer took the still recording camera and the 2 bodies inside the bunker, and inside one of the soldiers began to swing Jensen's camera around, which was still recording by the way, and then abandoned it where it was found later by Holly and Jensen. Remember the first time they examined the exact same camera and found their footage? The soldiers remarked the unusual ultra-modern dress of the two people, and they stripped them of their undergarments and hung them on meat hooks for further examination. And when the soldiers left, we see the emaciated bodies of Holly and Jensen coming to life, and surely they had mutated into monsters that they were trying to escape from. Shortly as the camera zooms in, we see the exact same tattoo found behind Holly's ears, revealing that they were the two missing persons from the report and that Isla claimed to have witnessed, and the movie concludes with an epilogue telling us that as of 2013, the world's leading scientists are still unable to explain what happened to the original Dyatlov group, but there are those who believe the answers are there, buried under the snow and rock, waiting to be discovered.
And with that, the movie ends. We hope you enjoyed our recap. Like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing recaps. See you in the next one.